What would you do if the one person who understood you completely, the one who made Monday mornings feel survivable, was the one person you were never, ever supposed to love? Not because he was taken, not because he was far away, but because he was your boss, and he was falling for you too. This is the story of Ryo and Haruki, and how one secret destroyed everything and somehow gave them back something they never expected to find. Stay with me, because this one is going to hurt. Ryo Shindou was 26 years old and absolutely convinced he didn't feel things deeply. He was organized, precise. He arrived at Aomori architecture firm every morning at exactly 8:47. Not 8:45, not 8:50, 8:47. He took his coffee black. He wore the same style of dark slacks every single day, and he told himself that the quiet life he had built was enough. He had learned early that wanting too much from people only left you standing alone in a cold hallway wondering where you went wrong. And then Haruki Kashima walked into their department. Director of Design, 32 years old, transferred from the Tokyo office with a reputation that preceded him like a thunderstorm. Sharp, demanding, brilliant. The kind of man who would look at a half-finished architectural draft and tell you exactly what emotion it was missing. Ryo was assigned as his direct assistant. Lucky him. The first week, Haruki barely acknowledged Ryo existed. He left notes on drafts, correction after correction in clean red ink. No explanation, no please, no thank you. Ryo revised everything without complaint, quietly, carefully. And then one evening, it was almost 9 o'clock, everyone else had gone home. The office was dark except for their 2 desk lamps. Haruki looked up from across the room. "You fixed the east wing framing without me asking." Ryo didn't even look up from his monitor. "It was structurally incorrect. I corrected it." A long silence. And Ryo would replay this moment for weeks afterward, Haruki almost smiled. Almost. It was nothing. It was 2 seconds, but Ryo felt it settle somewhere in his chest like a stone falling into still water. The ripples didn't stop. They worked late most evenings after that. Not because they planned to, it just happened. Deadlines, projects, presentations that needed one more revision, one more hour. But somewhere between the 3rd week and the 2nd month, the work became the excuse. Haruki started asking Ryo's opinion, not just on logistics, but on design choices, on feeling, on what a building should make a person feel when they walk inside. How does this space make you feel? Like the ceiling is too high, like whoever designed it wanted people to feel small, insignificant. Haruki was quiet for a long time. Yes, that's exactly it. I've been staring at this for 2 hours, and that's the word I couldn't find. Insignificant. Ryo told himself it was professional, collegial, normal. He was lying to himself, and somewhere in the silence of those late nights, he knew it. It started, as these things always do, with something small. The vending machine on the 4th floor had been broken for a week. Ryo mentioned offhandedly that he couldn't get the canned green tea he always had at 3 p.m. He didn't think twice about it. The next day, there was a canned green tea sitting on his desk. No note, no explanation. He looked across the room. Haruki was already buried in blueprints, but his jaw was set in that specific way, the way Ryo had learned meant he was pretending not to notice something. Ryo didn't say thank you. Haruki didn't say you're welcome, and somehow that said everything. After that, things shifted, slowly. The way seasons change. You can't point to the exact day summer becomes autumn. You just notice one morning that the air is different. Their fingers brushed, reaching for the same document. Neither pulled away immediately. Haruki started standing a little too close when reviewing Ryo's monitor. Close enough that Ryo could feel the warmth of him. Close enough that he had to remind himself to breathe normally. And late one Thursday night, both exhausted, takeaway boxes between them on the conference table, Haruki had said, "Do you ever wonder what your life would look like if you'd made completely different choices?" Ryo had looked at him then, really looked. The tired eyes, the loosened tie, the wall that Haruki kept so carefully built, cracked just slightly in the fluorescent dark. "I think about it sometimes, but I don't know if different choices would have led anywhere better, just different." Haruki had nodded slowly, like that was the answer he needed to hear but was almost afraid of. 2 days later, Haruki kissed him. In the copy room, after midnight, the building silent around them. It lasted 4 seconds. Haruki pulled back first, hands still on Ryo's face, and the look in his eyes was something Ryo had never seen before, terrified and certain at the same time. "I shouldn't have done that." Ryo looked at him for a long moment. "Then why did you?" Haruki didn't have an answer, or maybe he had too many, and none of them were safe enough to say out loud. They stood in that tiny room, in that enormous silence, and the world outside the door, the company, the hierarchy, the unspoken rules and unwritten codes pressed in from every side. They should have stopped there. They both knew it. They didn't stop. For 3 months, they existed in the space between what they were and what they couldn't be. At work, nothing. Distance. Professionalism. Haruki reviewed Ryo's work with the same clinical eye he applied to everyone. Ryo delivered results and asked for nothing extra. They were careful, so careful. But after hours, those extra hours they manufactured out of ambition and desire and the sheer unwillingness to say goodnight, they were just Haruki and Ryo, and everything was simple. They talked for hours, about cities Haruki had lived in, about the small coastal town Ryo grew up in where everyone knew everyone and expectations were handed out like inheritance, about architecture and music and whether a person could truly change or if they just accumulated more layers over the same core self. Haruki told Ryo once, sitting on the roof of the building at 11 at night, city lights spread below them like a broken constellation, "You are the most honest person I've ever met. Not because you say everything, but because you never say things you don't mean." Ryo had looked out at the city. "That's not honesty. That's cowardice. I don't say things because I'm afraid of what happens when words become real." Haruki was quiet for a while. "What would you say if you weren't afraid?" Ryo didn't answer. The city hummed beneath them, and Haruki reached over and covered Ryo's hand with his. Just that. Just the weight of it, and they stayed there until midnight came, and the city kept glittering on without them. But cracks were forming. Small ones at first. A colleague noticed that Haruki spent a lot of time reviewing Ryo's work personally, made a joke about favoritism at a team lunch. Ryo smiled and said nothing. Haruki laughed it off. But that night, in the quiet, Haruki said, "We have to be more careful." And Ryo heard what was underneath that. We have to be smaller. We have to shrink this. We have to make sure what we are fits into a box no one can see. He nodded. He said okay. He folded himself down a little more. Love should not make you smaller. But when it has no permission to exist, it does. The day everything changed was unremarkable until it wasn't. It was a Tuesday. End of the quarter review, half the senior staff in the conference room. Ryo had prepared the presentation materials. 3 weeks of work, late nights, precision. The presentation went well. The department head, Tanaka-san, praised it publicly. And then, with the kind of casual cruelty that powerful people don't realize they have, he said, "Kashima, you've really turned his unit around. Whatever you're doing with Shindou, it's working. He's a different person this year." Pause. Very deliberate. A different person this year. Ryo felt every person in that room recalibrate. The sidewise glances, the slight shift in the air. Nothing was said. Nothing needed to be. After the meeting, Ryo went back to his desk. He didn't look at Haruki. Haruki didn't come to him. 2 hours later, Haruki sent a message to Ryo's work email. "We Need to talk. Tonight. Roof. Ryo knew before he got there, the way you know before a doctor speaks, the way your body understands endings before your mind is willing to. Haruki was already there when he arrived, standing at the railing, back to the door, looking out at the city they had sat above so many nights. He didn't turn around immediately. I've been offered the Director General position, Tokyo office. Silence. When? I've been considering it for 6 weeks. 6 weeks? He had been carrying this for 6 weeks. And you didn't say anything. Haruki finally turned, and the look on his face, Ryo would describe it later, to nobody, in his own head, as a man standing at a crossroads who had already chosen his path and hated himself for it. I didn't know how, because saying it out loud meant having a conversation we haven't been able to have, about what we are, about what this can be. And I knew, Ryo, I knew that if we had that conversation, I would choose you. And I can't. Pause. Long and quiet. Voice drops almost to a whisper. I can't. 2 words. 2 words, and Ryo felt the whole architecture of the last 3 months shift on its foundations. Because of the company? Because of everything. The company, my career, what it would mean for you professionally if this ever came out. I'm your direct superior. I was supposed to protect you from exactly this kind of... I didn't need protecting. I know. That's what I told myself too, that we were both choosing this. But the power difference doesn't disappear just because we both want... He stopped. His jaw tightened. Say it. You want what? Haruki looked at him. In the city light, in the cold air, with 3 months of careful, quiet love between them. I want things I don't have the right to want. Not here. Not like this. Long pause. Voice very quiet. Ryo nodded. Very slowly, the way you accept something when arguing would be pointless and the grief is already settling into your bones. When do you leave? End of the month. 3 weeks. Ryo turned and looked at the city, the same lights, and thought about how a view could be identical and feel completely different depending on who was standing beside you. Okay. Just okay. That was all he had left. They didn't speak about it again. But something changed in those 3 weeks. Not an ending, not exactly. More like the decision to make every remaining hour count. Haruki brought green tea to Ryo's desk every day, without comment. Ryo made sure every project was in perfect order, nothing left unfinished, nothing Haruki would have to worry about once he was gone. They worked late every night of the last week, not talking about the leaving, just being, in the lamplight, in the shared silence, in the rhythm of 2 people who had learned to exist in the same space the way water fills whatever room it's given. On the last night, they went to the roof one more time. Haruki brought 2 cans of green tea. He handed one to Ryo, and they stood at the railing looking out at the city that had held their secret so carefully. Neither of them spoke for a long time. Then Haruki said, very quietly, "In another life, a different set of circumstances, I think we could have been something extraordinary." Ryo was silent for a moment. Then he answered, his voice very steady, but it takes everything he has. "We were something extraordinary. It just didn't get to last." Haruki closed his eyes, just for a moment, like he was trying to hold on to something he already knew was leaving. He reached over, took Ryo's hand. They stood like that until the city below them dimmed into the quiet hours of morning. They didn't say goodbye. Ryo left first. He took the stairs. He didn't look back. He couldn't. Haruki transferred at the end of the month. The office adjusted. Life continued, the way it always does, indifferent to the losses of individuals. Ryo was promoted 6 months later. He was good at his job. He had always been good at his job. He took his coffee black. He arrived at 8:47. He kept the quiet life he had built. It was enough. It was almost enough. One afternoon, 14 months later, he received an email. No subject line. Just a photo, an architectural rendering. A small building in a coastal town. Ceiling not too high. Warm proportions. The kind of space designed to make a person feel held, not small. Below the image, one line. Haruki. I finally designed a space that feels like what you described. Thank you for teaching me what I was looking for. Ryo sat with his phone for a long time. Then he typed back. Ryo. It's perfect. He meant the building. He meant all of it. And that is Ryo and Haruki. Not every love story ends with a grand reunion. Not every feeling gets to become a promise. Sometimes love is just two people in a lamp-lit office, reaching for the same document, choosing something beautiful, even when they can't keep it. And maybe that's enough. Maybe that has to be enough. If this story made you feel something, if you found yourself holding your breath somewhere in that copy room or on that rooftop, then you already know why we love this genre. Because boys' love stories do something other stories rarely do. They show us love in its most tender, most unprotected form, unashamed, even when it's hidden. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe. There are so many more stories where this one came from. Drop a comment below. Did you want them to end up together? Or was this ending the only honest one?